Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
With the first pick, the Detroit Pistons select Cade Cunningham from Oklahoma State University.
Chandler again. Oh, what a block by Maxfield! My goodness!
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
There's Jaden playing the passing lane. Skies a jam. Dynamite dunk, and the crowd loves it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing. Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Hello, Pistons fans, and welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, brought to you by, I believe, Aaron Johnson and Jasper, Apollonia, here with you for this week's show. We just took a week off, and that's something that I can't recall this show doing as a whole in quite some time. I feel like we've had at least two of us on each week for a podcast episode for quite a streak there. But we did take a week off last week, and of course, as soon as we decided we were going to take a week off last week, a bunch of stuff has happened since we last had a podcast episode. So we've got an absolute ton to get into. Excited to have Jasper here with me today. Before we get into everything, I do want to talk about what makes this show possible, and that's our sponsor, BetOnline. BetOnline.ag is the #1 source for all your sports basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports from this year's pro basketball playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all of your sports wagering needs. Basketball, MLB, NHL, hockey, right to the UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online where the game starts. Again, our promo code BLEAV to receive 50% on your first 50% bonus on your first deposit with betonline.ag. Okay, Jasper, good to have you with me. We got a lot of topics that we want to hit on and cover. The first thing that we have to bring to light is some news that came out last week that the Detroit Pistons were moving on from assistant general manager Rob Murphy. Murphy was promoted by the Detroit Pistons last summer after spending a season as the organization's president of the team's G League affiliate, the Motor City Cruise. The firing, it was announced amid allegations that came to light in October of 2022 by a female staff member of the Detroit Pistons organization of sexual harassment. And the accuser has since filed a lawsuit against Rob Murphy. The Pistons announced this just shortly before a released article that included quotes or included an interview with the accuser came out by the Detroit Free Press. But the Pistons having to make this decision, certainly not something that this organization wanted to be a part of, and it's certainly not something that puts them in a good light. Obviously, there's just absolutely no room for this type of misconduct in the workplace.
No, absolutely not. And we're not going to spend too much time on this because, we're not lawyers, and these are still, technically speaking, these are allegations still. We have to let the legal process play out in this case, but I really want to just touch on, I want to give, first off, Teresa Baldas and Amy Lang, both a lot of credit. Amy Lang over at Fox 2 Detroit, she did a sit-down interview with the accuser, DJ Raska. Teresa Baldas, she was the one who released the story for the Free Press, and I want to give both of them a lot of credit. I want to give the victim a lot of credit as well. That's really hard to do, not just to come forward against your boss, against a major organization in this town, but to come forward publicly and do a sit-down interview, 12 minutes long, detailing everything that she alleges. She deserves nothing but all the credit in the world for putting up with this alleged abuse and not staying silent on it. And that really, I think, just highlights the importance of local news, good local reporting, and people that are willing to stand up and say, hey, what's happening is not right. So I want to give all three of those women a lot of credit. Obviously, Aaron, there's no place for anything like this in a workplace environment, especially what's being alleged. Yeah, I mean, it's, people can look it up for themselves, but it's pretty horrible. And as somebody who's dealt with sexual harassment in the workplace myself, I can tell you from experience, it affects your entire life in a way that is incredibly difficult. You think about it constantly. You can't get it off of your mind. It's what you think about every single day. And when you're working with somebody in close proximity like that, man, I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for her to be in that environment, and then to also have to wait since October 2022 to actually have these allegations brought to a conclusion with the firing of Rob Murphy last Wednesday, which was one day before the release of the Free Press article. I don't want to go in on the Pistons organization. We don't know what happened behind the scenes. We don't know why it took them so long. And I think if you and I were ever accused of something like that, we would want our employers to take the time to properly investigate those allegations. So I'm not going to say anything about the Pistons here. I don't think we're in a place to do anything like that, but I just want to give the victim all the credit in the world here for coming forward and say unequivocally, this is wrong. It has no place, not only in the Pistons organization, but in any workplace environment, in any part of life. And I truly hope that this comes to a speedy conclusion, and that the victim finds justice. So that's really all I have to say on it, Aaron. I don't know if you have more to add, but that's how I feel.
I think you summed it up as much detail as we really need to go into on it. It's an incredibly unfortunate situation. It's wrong that this, occurred in the first place. And it did stick out to me that it took this Detroit Free Press article coming out for the Pistons to make the decision to, officially fire Rob Murphy, who had been on leave from the organization since October of 2022. But that's, I think you're right as well, and to where we don't need to get into any more speculation or making any, major claims or anything like that, while there's still a lot that seemingly needs to unravel with this between the organization and the accuser. So I think it's best we leave it there, and now we can move forward into some other recent news regarding the Detroit Pistons, and it's about the team's rookies from this season, Jaden, Ivey, and Jalen Duren. Both of them were named to the all-rookie second team. I think that it was expected that both of them would earn the honor. I think there was, at least to me, I was a little bit not shocked, but disappointed that Jaden Ivey did not get the first team all-rookie nod. Benedict Mathurin was, I guess you could say fifth guy if you had to rank him, that was named to the all-rookie first team. The others, Paolo Banchero, Jalen Williams, Walker Kessler. So not that any of those guys didn't deserve the honor, but I think Jaden Ivey just as much earned the right to be named to the first team. Nonetheless, both of them named to the all-rookie second team. Great seasons, I think, overall for the rookies. I'm a little disappointed Ivey didn't get the first team nod, but I feel like when it comes down to it, a lot of these decisions are made in that first half of the season. Benedict Mathurin obviously had a really strong start to the year, just like Paolo Banchero had a really strong start to the year. And Paolo was immediately locked in as the rookie of the year. I mean, it was 2 weeks into the season and people were like, yeah, the rookie of the year race is done. Paolo Banchero's won it, even though Jalen Williams had an absolutely phenomenal second half of the season that, not that he didn't get his props for, he obviously made the all-rookie first team, but he didn't even really make a dent in the rookie of the year race to Paolo Banchero. So these awards to me are especially these rookie ones, seemingly get decided very early on in the season. And I don't think it takes away from anything that Ivey has done this year. I thought he had a really, really strong season. To me, he exceeded my expectations, and whether that was due to it being because he had to take on a big role with Cade Cunningham out for the year or not, I was really, really impressed by Ivey. And like I said, he exceeded, what I had hoped he would be able to do for the Pistons in year one.
Yeah, no question. And look, the fact of the matter is Keegan Murray made the all-rookie first team over Jaden Ivey, which I have no problem with. And I still think if I went back and I did it again, I'd still take Ivey over Murray. He absolutely exceeded expectations. You're completely right. And yeah, maybe some of that had to do with, the role that he was forced to play with Cade Cunningham going down. But I really think he showed a lot of growth throughout the season, regardless of what he was being asked to do. You saw him grow as a passer. You saw him grow as a shooter, especially in terms of pull-ups and sort of terms of catch and shoot. He made some great strides, and even really, underlooked at. I think in the last 2.5 months of the season, I think he made some strides defensively as well that not a lot of people took notice of. Obviously, he's not a plus there. Don't get me wrong, but he improved greatly from where he was even in the middle of the season towards that All-Star break. So for me, yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. I'm not surprised. I'm disappointed. We talked about it a couple months ago, even that we thought Bennedict Mathurin would make it over Ivey, despite Jaden Ivey providing more in terms of assists. In terms of efficiency, it really was not that far off. And you look at the respective roles that they were asked to play. Jaden Ivey, 24% of his twos were assisted. Bennedict Mathurin, 60% of his twos were assisted. And when you have a guy like Tyrese Halliburton who can get you the ball in great places, the differences in their efficiency were not that vast. And when you look at what Ivey was asked to do versus what Mathurin was asked to do and what they produced in terms of output, to me, I don't really see how Bennedict Mathurin made it over him. He averaged 0.4 more points per game and 4.5 assists less. I mean, Mathurin had more turnovers than assists this year. That's a fact. So he didn't create for anybody else. He just came off the bench and he scored. And he played a little defense, but he wasn't so great defensively to where, Jaden Ivey being a negative there, the difference was so vast. Bennedict Mathurin was not Herb Jones of last year. So for me, that was the one quibble I had. Duren, second team, yeah, makes sense. Walker Kessler was a beast this year. Walker Kessler was an absolute monster. Honestly, if you asked Utah, hey, if you're at the Timberwolves, you go, hey, you want to take Gobert back for Walker Kessler? I don't think Utah would say yes, straight up, to be honest, at this point. So, yeah, you can't be mad at that. The other four guys on that first team absolutely deserved it. I have my issues with Mathurin over Ivey, but like you said, these awards are decided in the first month. Last year, Cade Cunningham lost to the Rookie of the Year in his first month of play. This year, Paolo Banchero won it in his first month of play. Despite, and this is the crazy thing, despite shooting worse than Cade Cunningham from 2, from 3, and from the free throw line. But you didn't hear so much about Paolo Banchero being inefficient. You heard a lot about Cade Cunningham. So I always think these quote-unquote discussions, because they're not really discussions, they're soapboxes for people to stand on. I always find those things interesting.
Yeah, I think, what we said, it's certainly true. And I've heard other people kind of say it as well. These awards, again, they're decided early on, and it's the narratives that are built within the first week or two, and it makes life easier. It makes the job easier for the voters who just decide to run with that narrative no matter what. And it's not a slight on any of these guys. I mean, I think this year's rookie class has had some really strong performers for a class that, one, was missing one of its best prospects in Chet Holmgren all season, and two, wasn't considered to be an outstanding rookie class. I think there's a good group of guys, these guys that made the first and second teams. All of them have all-star level potential at some level. I don't know if any of them are going to be superstars. I think Paolo Banchero can be a superstar. I don't know if anyone else can be a superstar in terms of a top 15, 20 player, top 15, 20, 25 player. But
you don't think, sorry, real quick, but you don't think Jaden Ivey could get to that like De'Aaron Fox level? I think Fox is a 15, 20 top player.
I think if I went through and ranked the top 15, 20 players in the league, maybe De'Aaron Fox is right at 20.
Okay.
I mean, it could be close. I
Yeah.
guess I'd have to go through and really go, player by player. I think Jaden Ivey, has all-star potential. I think he's one of those guys.
Sure.
I think he has one of the higher ceilings out of that draft class, which is part of the reason why I was a proponent of taking him last year. It's something that we talked about extensively leading up to the draft is, you need to get guys with higher potential. And Jaden Ivey stood out to me as one of those guys. But I just think this class this season played really, really well. And to me, someone like Jalen Williams, who wasn't a top 5 pick or anything, like for him to be an all rookie first team selection, arguably a top candidate for the Rookie of the Year award, to have a huge role on the Oklahoma City Thunder, who made it to the play-in, and he played well in the play-in. Like this class, I'd say has over exceeded expectations, and they're missing Chet Holmgren, who I think has the potential to be better than anyone else in the class. We don't know, but a number 2 pick for a reason. I really enjoyed this year's class, and it was a class that going into the draft, going into the season, I didn't think was going to be this talented.
Aaron, I have to ask, if you got like a random sampling of 10 average NBA fans, guys who watch games and follow the league, how many of them do you think would say that, between Jaden Ivey and Benedict Mathurin, how many of them do you think would say who shot better from 3 on greater volume? Benedict Mathurin or Jaden Ivey? Because my guess is if you asked them, 9 out of 10 would say Benedict Mathurin shot more threes and shot better from 3, even though that wasn't the case. I think that's like another interesting thing with it. Like Jaden Ivey shot half a 3 more per game than Benedict Mathurin did, and shot 3% better from long distance. Like, I don't know, man. That really bugs me.
I think I'm
really bothered by that.
Went on, it goes hand in hand with what we've already said. Ivey was better by the end of the season. It just didn't matter. It was too late at that point. I think Ivey grew defensively as a shooter. Like I was hammering Ivey's defense, and I still think, rightfully so, I was hammering Ivey's defense in that first half of the season. But he
no question
got better as time went on.
Yeah, I mean, dude, he had that game against Minnesota where he was just going over every screen and like going so hard in recovery. Man, towards the end of the season, I hope people go back and kind of watch some of those possessions he played, because like he made really big strides with his effort, especially like he wasn't gambling on steals to not nearly enough to start the season. He started doing it a little bit more, like to finish things up. I really do hope that people go back and watch some of those games, because I think if they see what we saw, they'll see that really like that multi-time all-star potential. Yeah, I mean, you know me, I was going into the draft not super duper sold on Jaden Ivey. I'm very much sold on him now.
Yeah, I think he was he was arguably the team's best player by the end of the season in terms of guys that were still healthy. I think when you take into account the role that he had to play for the Pistons as well. I mean, Benedict Mathurin was coming off the bench, wasn't the primary guard or anything. Jaden Ivey kind of got pigeonholed into being that, and the growth he made, as a facilitator, as the lead ball handler. Obviously, there's still question marks about his efficiency finishing at the rim, but the strides that he made from October to April to March were incredible. And again, I think by the end of the year, Jaden Ivey was better than Benedict Mathurin. But I don't want to harp on this any further, because we've got a lot of other stuff to talk about still. A lot more news to talk about. A lot of news hitting the Pistons right now. As we took a week off from the show, it was just, I guess, a way to get at us for not having a show last week. We've got some more news on the coaching front for the Pistons. I think 7 different reporters reported this. Shams reported it. James Edwards III reported it. Mike Curtis reported it. I mean, there's probably 2 to 3 more other reporters that have this story as well. But this week, the Detroit Pistons are meeting or have already met with 3 head coaching finalists for their opening position. Those 3 names are the names that we've been hearing since the start of the search. Kevin Ollie, the head coach of Overtime Elite and former head coach of UConn men's basketball. Charles Lee, the associate head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. And Jarron Collins, the assistant coach of the New Orleans Pelicans.
Aaron, I'm sorry. What is up with you and Kevin Ollie?
What am I saying?
Kevin Ollie. Kevin Ollie.
Kevin Ollie.
Yeah. No, Kevin Ollie. Not Kevin Ali. Kevin Ollie.
Kevin Ollie. I don't.
Oh my God. I feel bad.
Can I not say it?
No, wait.
Tim Forkin
give
has
it to
had
me
the same
one more time. Give
conversation.
it to me one more time.
Now I'm overthinking it. Kevin Ollie.
Yeah.
Kevin
Yeah, that was good. That was good. That was good. That was good. Let's leave it at that.
I gotta really pay
I'm sorry. I don't mean to bust your chops. It's cracking me up.
For the people that are just listening, this is something that I've now been called out on like 3 times. Tim Forkin has attacked me on this multiple occasions. I'm not trying to say it wrong. It's just kind of, I guess, how it rolls off my tongue, I guess.
You're getting dragged by Tim Forkin on Maine.
It is what it is, I guess, at this point. Kevin, okay, I'll say it again. Please confirm if this is right or wrong. I think I was over-exaggerating the end of his name. So, Kevin Ollie.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
Mwah. Buonissimo.
I am going to try to ingrain that in my mind and into my native tongue, I guess.
You got to do the Dexter's Lab. You got to put a headset over and just have it play his name. Omelette du fromage, Kevin Ali.
Yeah, instead of listening to like peaceful sounds when I'm trying to sleep, I'm just gonna listen to different sports broadcasts where they're saying Kevin Ollie's name.
Listening to like Jim Calhoun pressers from like 2001. Anyway, sorry.
Okay,
yeah, but no.
To the discussion. These are the 3 finalists for the Pistons head coaching position. I am going to remain, for what I know as a public, on the outside person, looking at the situation, looking at the coaches available. I think this is a really underwhelming group to me. I'll maintain that I think out of these 3 guys, Charles Lee is the best candidate. He's a part of a couple other head coaching groups right now that are being interviewed. He's most recently been added to the Milwaukee Bucks coaching search after they decided to move on from Mike Budenholzer. So I think Charles Lee is the top candidate. In my mind, I think we're starting to get a better idea of who is going to be named the head coach, and it's my least favorite candidate.
Yeah.
But it kind of is what it is at this point, and I think I'm just going to start living with it and moving on because I can't believe the decision. I don't see how a guy that hasn't been a part of any other teams coaching interviews over the last handful of years is involved in this type of discussion and has become, the favorite. I don't get it. I think when you look at the history that Troy Weaver has with Kevin Ollie, that's what makes the connection. And to me, that's not a good enough reason. Like, oh, I worked with this guy before. I know this guy. He's the right guy. I could be totally wrong. I hope I am wrong. Yeah, obviously I don't want the Pistons to mess this coaching search up because I think if they do, it's Troy Weaver's kumbaya. He'll be done. But the coaching search is winding down for the Pistons, and as we get closer and closer to the final results, I am more and more uneasy with the reality sinking in that Kevin Ollie is going to be the team's next head coach.
Yeah, I'm with you on this, Aaron. I mean, we've been harping on it for a while. I'm a little more intrigued by Jarron Collins, I think, than you are. Just looking into the defenses that he's coached, he's got a track record there. And I don't think that that's something when you look at a team that's as poor as the Pistons are defensively that you can really just ignore. Charles Lee, though, obviously, I think if we're talking qualifications, he's got to be number 1 on that list. I mean, with Ollie, it's just like, yeah, for the reasons you hit on, he hasn't been a part of an NBA coaching search. Has he even been a part of a college coaching search like recently? I can't remember his name's coming up with anything. yeah, he's part of Overtime Elite, but he's not even a coach. Like, he is the head of coaching development for Overtime Elite. He's not even coaching right now. So for me, it's just, on some level, I respect Troy Weaver for being willing to go down with the ship, to be carried out on his shield, whatever kind of other cliche you want to use here. But as a fan, and let's be real, I am a fan of the Pistons. This is a coaching search that I think I know where it's going, and it makes me really nervous. It's hard to get excited about a guy, again, who's not even a coach right now. Like, not even a coach right now. Hasn't been a coach for years and hasn't popped up anywhere. So I don't know, man. I mean, he won a title at UConn and was gone 3 years later. He couldn't really recruit. That makes you a little worried about how he connects with young players. And this is still a really young team. So, yeah, I don't know really what else we have to say here. I like Charles Lee. I like Jarron Collins. Compared to Kevin Ollie, are they necessarily the guys I'd be going after? No. Mike Budenholzer's out there. And, like, I have a lot of criticisms of Mike Budenholzer as a coach. He's very set in his ways, very stubborn, doesn't make a lot of great adjustments. And we've seen that bite him multiple times in the playoffs. But when it comes to the regular season, when it comes to making the playoffs and being a competitive team, I don't know if there's 5 head coaches in the league better than Mike Budenholzer. That guy won 60 games with Paul Millsap, Al Horford as his best players. Like, what else can you say other than that? The guy gets results. So for me, it's a little worrying that he's not even being thrown into the mix there. But yeah, I think for me, I'm with you. Charles Lee, Jarron Collins, and then Kevin Ollie.
Yeah, I think it's, to me, very clear that if Mike Budenholzer was available and wanted to coach the Detroit Pistons, like, he should be far and away the number one candidate. He had his faults, obviously, but he also won an NBA title with Milwaukee. And there were a lot of factors that played into Milwaukee's uneventful run in the playoffs this year. And it started with them not having the best player in the league healthy for 3 of the games. Like, they ran into a Jimmy Butler whose playoff performance is something that we're going to be looking back on in awe for years if it continues on the trajectory that the Heat are on now, with him seemingly about to lead this team to the Eastern Conference Finals. And dare they might be the favorite to come out of the East in that series, assuming they make it there, if they match up with either Boston or Philadelphia, who both have serious issues with their own team right now. I mean, they're just running into a team that kind of has that team of destiny feel. And Jimmy Butler has that player of destiny feel right now. And, it's not a excuse. Like, the Bucks still should have been able to find a way to win that series, but they won the most games in the league this year. Mike Budenholzer has obviously garnered so much respect. He has such a rich history of winning at every stop and developing at every stop along the way. It's disappointing that the Pistons haven't gotten involved in that. And it seems like they're already at a point in their coaching search where they're ready to make that hire. And it's a little bit disappointing because it sounded like initially the Pistons were going to kind of wait until after the playoffs or towards the end of the playoffs to see who else became available. But we're now getting the news that they're speaking to their finalists. And that means that someone like Mike Budenholzer, who hasn't been discussed yet, probably isn't getting an interview at this point.
Nope.
It's disappointing. And again, I thought of the available coaches, some of the guys that, we've mentioned before. I just don't think the Pistons ended up with the best group as the candidates. I wouldn't have Kevin Ollie in my finalist group. Charles Lee would be there. Charles Lee would be the one guy out of this group that I could really get behind hiring, and I would probably be able to get behind hiring Collins as well. But it sounds like they're going to go with the guy that, to the public's knowledge, just doesn't have the history, the accolades to step in and be an NBA coach. A guy that hasn't been coaching college or NBA basketball in years. And to Ollie's credit, he's gotten great reviews from his former teammates in the league. He was super well respected in Oklahoma City. That's where him and Troy Weaver made connection. But he was super well respected there by the players. Kevin Durant spoke very highly of him. Russell Westbrook spoke very highly of him. But that's a decade ago. It's like it's not 2013 anymore. It's 2023, and this guy really hasn't been coaching at a high enough level in years. And again, the final point I want to make on this, because I don't want to drag this out, but Troy Weaver has to know that if he misses on this hire, he's done. You can't go 5-6 years of not making the playoffs, of falling short of expectations, and get to hire a second head coach as a general manager. Like, he's already had 3 years and not a whole lot to show for it. He messes up this hire, it's got to be the end of his tenure with Detroit. So the other part I want to say to myself, Troy Weaver cannot be silly enough to just be hiring one of his buddies because it's one of his buddies. He has to know the significance and the importance behind this hiring for himself and for the franchise, but really for himself, because if it doesn't work out, he's probably getting booted out the door with this head coach. So that's what I'm trying to tell myself, to maybe give a little bit of hope that this is going to be the right hire for the Pistons. And who knows, maybe we're all getting thrown through a loop and getting messed with, and it won't be Kevin Ollie, but it just seems that's the way we're headed.
Oh my God, Aaron, do you hear that? That's Red Auerbach's music, back from the dead. For sure. I think we have been in lockstep on this for a while now. I'm going to join in though. Before we move on, I am also going to say, talking about head coaches, Erik Spoelstra, my God, give this man his flowers. Give this man his flowers. So they might be going to his seventh Eastern Conference Finals since he took over. And I know 4 of those came with LeBron James and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, but 3 of them have come in the last 4 years. If they make it past the Heat, or past the Knicks, I mean 3 Eastern Conference Finals in 4 years with Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo as your best players. I mean, what a monster. What an absolute monster. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Biggest travesty of the all NBA 75-year list, Doc Rivers over Erik Spoelstra. I dare you to find me 3 better head coaches in the last 10 years than Erik Spoelstra. I dare you. That guy is a monster. He can win with anyone. Give Erik Spoelstra his flowers. That's who I'd like to have as the Pistons head coach. He gave me my head coach. I'm taking Spo all day. Plus his dad went to Birmingham Seaholm, so local connection. What more can you want?
Yeah, it would be nice if the Pistons could end up with Erik Spoelstra, wouldn't it?
Not gonna happen. Pat Riley will slaughter a goat at the altar of Moloch and use its blood to slick back his hair before he lets Erik Spoelstra go to the Pistons. That's never happening. But yeah.
Well, we talk about it, and it is prevalent. No matter, I don't think anyone could really deny it at this point that coaching trees are significant in the NBA, and it's how a lot of coaches get their opportunities, is being part of a successful coach's coaching tree. And for me, that's why I am shocked that Chris Quinn didn't get into the finals group, or isn't getting that opportunity.
Don't even bring him up. You're gonna make me sad. Yeah, I know. But you know what? Look, when you have a chance to hire a guy that comes from the Jim Calhoun and Scotty Brooks coaching tree, I mean, how can you pass that up?
It's just, it's something, I guess, from the public we don't understand. Again, I hope to be wrong on this. I hope to be looking back at this in this same position next year and saying, at the same time of the year next year, saying Pistons got it right.
Yeah, I want to look stupid. I want to look like an idiot.
Yeah, this is when I want to look dumb. But for the information that I have, it just doesn't seem like the right hire. Anything else that you want to add on this topic before we move on to our final?
You know what, man? Coaches coach, players play. Let's move on to the players.
Yeah, we are going to move on to the players. James Edwards III of The Athletic released an article earlier this week where he speculated on some realistic free agency options for the Detroit Pistons this summer. This is not a report that the Pistons are targeting these players specifically, He's, citing these as guys that the Pistons could realistically target. So he's not saying that the Pistons are going after these guys. One of the names that he has in this piece, Jeremy Grant, is someone that has been linked to the Pistons as a free agency target this upcoming offseason in a report. But these other names that we're mentioning are all speculative and just for point of discussion. But Edwards named, Jeremy Grant, Karis LeVert, Grant Williams, Austin Reeves, Max Struss, among other names as targets for the Detroit Pistons this summer, realistic targets for the team as Troy Weaver tries to build out a better roster heading in to next season. There were some other names on this list. None of them were as significant as the names already mentioned, like Yuta Watanabe, who I actually wouldn't mind, was on the list. There was a couple other smaller names as well, Torrey Craig. But
what about your boy, Cam Johnson?
Was he on that list? Did I miss that?
You missed Cam. You didn't mention him.
Oh my God, that's right. And you know what? Cam Johnson's on the cover art for the podcast. What a miss by me. This is why we need Mike hosting. There's too much going on. There's too much going on. I can't handle it. Cam Johnson, yes. But we talked. I'll save it for the discussion. I think this list overall was pretty underwhelming in general, considering I'll maintain my stance that the Pistons have to get a rather significant upgrade to the roster in terms of getting an all-star level player on the team. I don't think any of these guys fit that billing if this team's serious about making a major jump in the standings anytime soon. But overall, this list to me was, again, pretty underwhelming. What did you think about the names that were linked to the Detroit Pistons?
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, I thought it was interesting that Kyle Kuzma and Harrison Barnes weren't on the list. To be honest, they probably aren't legitimate targets, but I did think it was interesting they weren't on there. For me, looking at these names, it's really divided into two groups. There's the guys that you have to throw a lot of money at, and you're expecting them to come in and really, be your day one starter, provide at least number 3, number 4 option level of production. And then the other guys are guys that you bring in to be maybe your spot starter, maybe your really effective option off the bench. For me, it's like two groups. So I look at the first group, the guys that you're really going to have to pay. I think that's your Jeremy Grant. I think that's Cam Johnson. I think that's Grant Williams. And as crazy as it sounds, I think at this point, it's probably Austin Reeves as well. What he's shown with the Lakers, not just in terms of as a shot maker, but as a creator for others, he's going to get some money this offseason. I think he's going to get better than like Kyle Anderson got on the Timberwolves. For me, I think he's a good player. For me, Karis LeVert, I'm not really all that interested in. Matisse Thybulle, I'm really not interested in. Cam Reddish, I mean, how many times can this man be linked to the Detroit Pistons? No, thank you. I'm good. I'm fine, man. I'm good on Cam Reddish. I don't need to hear about him anymore. Those are guys that I'm not so interested in. But then you look at the other players like, I like Yuta Watanabe, but he's not a starter. He's going to be 29 years old. He's a decent shooter. He's a really good effort guy. But let's be honest, he's never played more than 16 minutes per game in a season at going into 29 years old. Like, that's not a guy you can depend on to come in and be your starter. Torrey Craig. I love Torrey Craig. Like, one of my favorite role players. Is that a guy you can rely on for 30 minutes a night to be your number 4 scorer, number 5 scorer even? I don't know. And then you look at the other guys on the list, like your Jeremy Grant, your Grant Williams. Karis LeVert even. Like, I have a hard time seeing you bring them in for a price that isn't an overpay. I have a really hard time seeing that. And then you look at where you're at in a couple of years. Are those guys going to be worth their contracts? I don't know. For me, really, I like Max Strus. I worry he's going to cost too much. I like Cam Johnson a lot. I worry he's going to cost too much. And I think this kind of brings back to what you're saying. It's an underwhelming list because if you bring in one of those more higher tier guys, you're going to have to pay them probably $20 million plus a year. I mean, Jeremy Grant, 25, 28 million plus a year. It's going to cost you some money. I have a really hard time seeing that you're going to get a return back on those players that is really going to feel like you justified the contract. And then we've talked about it before. When you start having to pay Cade, when you start having to pay Ivey, I know it's a little bit down the road, but like if you pay Jerami Grant a 4-year deal, Cade Cunningham's contract is up in 2 years. Like that's going to affect it. Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, their contracts are up in 3 years. That's going to be on the same timeline as one of these free agents' contracts. So it's a very difficult position I think the Pistons are in. It's easy to say, look, we have the cap space, we can overpay. You have to look down the line. The reason Troy Weaver has gotten so many flowers when he came in is because he fixed up the Pistons cap situation. You can't have it to where 4, 5, 6 years down the line, after clearing all that money off the books, that you're back in the same position where you're a middle of the pack team paying minimal guys way too much because you were trying to compete. So, Aaron, I don't know if you feel differently about any of the guys I've mentioned, about the situation the players are, the Pistons are in, but I genuinely think if the Pistons are serious about upgrading their wing, it's either got to come through the draft or it's probably got to come through a trade. And I think that those are probably the best two options available to them if you want to maintain a relatively clean cap before you go take that leap into being a title contender. Because once you do that, you are going to have to make trades, big money trades for big money players. Every contending team does it. So you have to be sure of where you're at. Look at the Suns. They just traded for Kevin Durant, but by doing so, they destroyed all their depth. They're going to probably lose to the Nuggets in Game 6. They're almost certainly going to lose. And like, where are you then? You have a messed up cap, an aging roster, and nobody to replace them. So the Pistons have to be really cautious here. I wonder if you have a different perspective.
Unfortunately, for the sake of entertainment value, I really don't. I think it's going to have to come down to making a move in the trade market. It's going to have to be some sort of, taking some of your assets and consolidating them into a package to make a move for an all-star level player. And, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be possible this summer. It does seem like every year, at least a few names become available and a team has to make a decision if they're willing to move the picks, to move the young players to go get them. If I'm the Pistons and I end up with anything but the number 1 pick in the draft in the lottery next week, I'm certainly looking at moving the pick. There's not a guy, it'd be nothing against Scoot Henderson. I really like Scoot Henderson, but if you can use that pick to go get a wing that's you really feel is going to fit better and has, the all-star pedigree, it's a lot easier to move that pick. Now, if you get the number 1 pick, your decision's made for you. No one's trading off that pick. Everyone's taking Victor Wembanyama. Whoever gets the number 1 pick, I would imagine the package to move off one would be absolutely massive from a team that tries to trade up for it. But I just don't see a team moving up for it at this point. But if the Pistons don't end up with 1, if they end up with 2, if they end up with 3, if I'm Troy Weaver, I'm looking to move that pick. I'm looking to take that pick and something else. I don't know what type of value around the league a guy like Isaiah Stewart has. I don't think Killian Hayes has as value around the league, to be completely honest with you. So I don't think he's a name that, as much as you or I maybe don't believe he should be on the roster next year or really fits the roster next year, I'm sure you probably feel there's a clearer path for him to be on the roster next year. For someone like me, I maybe don't, but nonetheless, I don't know what else the Pistons put with that number 2 pick or the number 3 pick or wherever they end up. But I'm looking to move that to get a real piece on this roster, because drafting someone like Scoot Henderson, yes, they can do it, but it's gonna be harder for them to get to where they want to be next year, which is reportedly in the playoff mix, in the playoff hunt. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I don't think any of these names really stand out to me. I like Jerami Grant. I've maintained that I've liked Jerami Grant. At this point, though, you're talking about paying him $30 million a year. I don't know if I want to commit to that at this point with just how far off this team looks. Cam Johnson's going to be a popular name. He's a good player. I liked Cam Johnson pre-draft. He was who I wanted the Pistons to take that year, not Sekou Doumbouya. But at this point, he's probably getting $20 million a year. And I don't know if you want to use your cap space on him. He's a good player, but again, this team needs something more than that. And like you've said, sooner rather than later, it's going to be time to pay Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, all these other guys. This group just doesn't really do anything for me, and it's why I just don't believe this team is going to be in a spot next year to actually compete for the postseason, like is being discussed, because they've done so little at this point to put the roster in that position, outside of hoping that there's enough internal development where this team just makes a massive jump. But it just doesn't seem like that's gonna be possible, especially when they're bringing in a first-year NBA head coach seemingly as well on top of that. So
yeah. I think the dream is like Jalen Brown says, hey, I'm not re-signing with Boston after next year because contract is up after next year, and you get the 2 pick. And I mean, I don't know. The problem is Boston's in win now mode. So if they're trading Jalen Brown, they're trading him for another all-star. I think even if you said, hey, here's Jaden Ivey and the 2nd pick, I have a hard time believing Boston would say that, even though they might feel that the value is equivalent, I have a hard time seeing where they would say, yeah, but like we have Jason Tatum. Like we have a team that has to win now. We're still shooting for a title these next 2, 3, 4 years. So it's a very difficult situation. Really, it is. But you have to, I think, find a solution in the trade market. And here's the good thing, though. There is always an underachieving team, an unhappy superstar halfway through the season. It happens every single year. And not just one team, not just one superstar. There's 2 or 3. It happens. So while it's not clear right now what the solution is, I'm also of the belief that a package will open up at some point. I really do think there will be something. And look, if the Pistons are serious about contending, then the fact of the matter is you have to be willing to start parting with first-round picks after this year. Maybe even for this year. If trade opens up at the draft, I think you definitely have to consider moving off of a pick that's between 2 and 5. I really do think you have to. And again, going into the trade deadline, if you're in a position where you can make the playoffs, I think there has to be a real question of whether you're willing to move future draft picks as well. You have to consolidate at a certain point. We said it during the summer last year when the Cavs traded for Donovan Mitchell. Like, the Pistons are going to have to do the same thing at a certain point. And you have to be really smart about it because, like we just saw with Cleveland, they made that move for Donovan Mitchell, and it took them from the play-in, losing in the play-in, to losing in the first round. It's hard to win in the NBA, even with multiple star players. It's really difficult. So, yeah, we've been saying it for a while. The Pistons are in a really precarious position. Troy Weaver has to nail this coaching hire. He has to nail this draft, and he has to nail free agency. That is a really difficult proposition for any GM. Any GM. I don't care who they are. To nail all 3 in one offseason is a tall task. So I have my doubts, but again, I'm still hopeful, and we'll see what he can do. He's zagged before when we've thought, there was only 1 or 2 options available, and I'm not going to put it past him to do it again.
No doubt. That's one. If there's one thing you can say about Troy Weaver is that he is unpredictable. He can pull a feather out of a cap and completely, shock people with his decision making sometimes, good or bad.
That's why he's daddy. You know what I mean? Yeah. He's an alpha. He's a freaking Chad. He's a Sigma. Like he's dude, the guy, that's why he's Daddy Troy. Like he's the big boss. And like, you know what I mean? You think you got him figured out, and then boom, he switches up on you.
Agreed with it.
That's why he's the big daddy. So yeah, there you go. I don't think there's anything else to say after that. I think we Troy Weaver's daddy. Pistons are in a tough position. Kevin Ollie, not Kevin Ollie. What else is there to say?
It's a big week for the Pistons. NBA lottery next week. We'll certainly be talking about where they end up.
Woo! Next week, Aaron. Oh,
massive night for the franchise, one way or the other. It's going to be a a celebration of years of losing and what was the most miserable past season of play, or it's going to be a how the hell could this have possibly gotten worse?
We're going to have the editor either ready to insert celebration by Kool and the Gang or hurt by Johnny Cash. One of the two. It's going to be that kind of podcast.
I don't. Yeah, I've had people really a middle ground. I think it's really.
It's one or the other, man. Yeah, I think it's one or the other. And I've had people ask me, like, when are you doing a draft preview? I say when the lottery finishes, because the fact of the matter is, if the Pistons get number one, you don't need me to evaluate the other prospects in this class. You know where it's going. If they get anything else, then we can talk about, hey, who's getting picked here. It's kind of that simple. We'll know.
We'll draft lottery on Tuesday. Jasper, anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up this week's show?
No, that's it for me. I'm looking forward to the draft lottery the same way I would a biopsy. It's either going to be really good news or really bad news. So hopefully the prognosis is negative.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong there. All right, well, I think we hit on a ton this week. It's what we get from missing last week's show, but we'll certainly be back next week. Hopefully, we'll have Mike with us. He's doing a lot of big boy things lately in life. I can't relate, but that's why he's not been on the show. He's got real life stuff going on. He's
not missing our lottery review though. That for sure. He can't miss that one.
There's a clause in his contract that says he can't miss that. So
nice.
We will have all three of us back next week. I'm not going to guarantee it, but I'm going to guarantee it. That's going to do it.
I'm going to guarantee it. So it's happening.
Guaranteed.
It's guaranteed.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's show, everyone. Make sure to use our promo code BELIEVE with BetOnline for a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit with BetOnline. Thanks so much to them for sponsoring this week's show. From Jarron Johnson and Jasper Apollonia, thanks so much for listening to this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, and we will see you next week.